Good morning and welcome to Autism-Live. I am just painfully running behind. So I've got makeup half on, half not, because that is how this morning is going. So thrilled to be here with you. I told Traven I'm going to come back, wait a minute, play the opener, and then play the, I thought I would hear it. So I thought a minute still hadn't elapsed, Traven. So there we are. Doesn't matter. We're here. We go with what we have. Happy President's Day, everybody. So excited to be here with you this morning, as I said, live on the 15th of February, and I'm a little out of breath. So lots going on here this morning, but very thrilled to be here. As I said, we are live right now on many different platforms, and the big four that we are live on right now: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Periscope. You can be interacting with us on those sites right now. We encourage you to just pop something into the chat so that we see that you're here with us. We also want you to know that we are live on many other sites, every place that Traven, the fabulous Traven, can find. And we podcast to many other sites. In fact, pretty much any place where you find your podcast, that is where you will find us. Now, I mentioned we're live, and we're going to be live for the next hour. We're going to be talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. Hey, Austin. We're so thrilled that you're coming to us from Indianapolis, and we're so thrilled that you are here. And you brought up an interesting point that I want to make sure everybody knows. This show is meant for the entire autism community. And when I say the entire autism community, of course, that has to start with people who are on the autism spectrum. We want for you to have a voice here. We want to hear your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, your concerns. But I will tell you that here on this show, we also can include everyone who loves those individuals, everybody who wants to see them get the rights and all of the good things in life, the resources to be able to have all the things that are important to that community. So that's who we include here. We want to provide information and inspiration, but also to lend a voice. This is a place, a safe space where we're not all going to agree, right? Because that huge autism community is very diverse and people have different wants and desires and needs. That's okay. We welcome that diversity, but we want to be able to give everybody an opportunity to have a voice and have a discussion. I think that there's much more that we agree on than we're willing to always admit, right? Because we all agree that individuals on the autism spectrum deserve respect. They deserve the right to decent employment, right? The right to love who they love, to wear what they want to wear, to make themselves happy in the way that they want to make themselves happy. Right? Of course they deserve that, but sometimes we have to fight for that. Sometimes we have to educate people for that. So I think we can all agree on those things. After that, it all becomes very individual, as it should, because this is a very diverse community. I love that about the autism community. So that's what our show is about. We want to inform and inspire. That's what we're here for. We welcome lots of expert guests here on the show and lots of guests in general. Not all of them are experts. I am the host, not a guest, and I am not an expert. Holding up my hand and reminding all of you that I'm here because this is important to me. My credential to be here starts with the fact that I'm the mom of an individual who was diagnosed with autism at a very early age, and I'm here to serve him. And also because I made a promise that to the universe that if I could find things that were helpful to him and to me in helping him, that I would make sure that I created something to be able to help other people move it, that pay it forward kind of thing. So that is why I'm here. I now am someone who, as I look at my life, I think that the vast majority of people in my life can be included in that group that I was talking about earlier. So many of my friends are teens and adults who are on the autism spectrum, and the people who love them. So that is a large, or are working to help them. That is a large portion of my community. It didn't used to be that way. My community changed with time. But I'm so glad that that is my community now. I've found my home. As Eustacia Cutler says, you find your tribe, right? And I'm so thrilled to have found my tribe. and want to be of service to that tribe. So that is why I'm here. Reminding you again, as I was saying, our podcasts are available at pretty much everywhere you get a podcast. It's a free download. We are also, how about this? We are also on BronxNet TV. And if you would like for us to be, if you have a cable access channel in your community, let us know if you would like for us to be there, because we are looking to place ourselves in a few more of those this year. We really love BronxNet. Woohoo! The Bronx, right? So let us know if that is something that interests you. All right. On Mondays, because today is Monday, even though it's a holiday and it's President's Day, we like to start off with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about? What does this have to do with us? How can this be of use to us? It can be overwhelming, right? I get so overwhelmed sometimes, and I certainly did in the beginning. Somebody would start talking to me. I would ask a question about how could I support my son? How could I help him? And I would get back a bunch of jargon. And in the beginning, I got to be honest with you, my son was diagnosed at 2.5, and the thing that really sparked us looking into, what's going on was that he had been speaking in full sentences. And then right around when he turned 2, the words started to go away slowly but surely until there was nothing left. And my beginning understanding was I want my child to be able to speak. And I think that a lot of us feel that way in the beginning, not knowing that, first of all, there are lots of other ways of communicating, right? But I think it's that gut reaction of I want my child to speak. And I was asking experts, how do you get a child to speak? And our jargon term today is one of the first things that you're going to hear when we talk about how do we get someone to communicate. And I'm going to bounce back and forth between speech, which is vocal communication, right? But I'm also going to be talking about non-vocal communication, because there's a large portion of our community that does not use vocal communication. So we'll bounce, because this jargon term really encompasses both. And let's take a look at it first. So our jargon term today is mand. And the first time you hear this, it's usually one of the first jargon terms that you hear, and it's a little bit like, what did you say? Did you say man? I want my child to man, but it's mand with a D on the end, M-A-N-D. And usually the people who say this to us say it like, as if you were saying, pass me the salt. Like salt is just a word that we all use, and they will use this word as if, of course, like, how can you not know what a mand is? Because if you are not someone who has a degree in psychology or speech, you're not going to know what a mand is. But once you know what a mand is, I guarantee you're going to use this in conversation at some point, and then you're going to catch yourself and go, did I just say that? Like, what just happened? You will have turned to the dark side. So what is a mand and why is it important? First, we give you the actual definition, which we make fun of whenever possible. Then we give you a working definition, and then we try to put it into context so that hopefully you will have a germ of an understanding, just that kernel of understanding to move forward with. Don't panic if you don't, though, because sometimes these things take multiple repetitions and seeing it in the natural environment before you go, okay, I think I get it now, right? And that's the moment that we're really working towards, is the moment where you go, I think I got it now. Okay, mand. This is the actual definition. The mand is a type of verbal behavior that is controlled by motivating operation, deprivation, or an averse state, and is followed by a specific reinforcement. The mand specifies its own reinforcer. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why we do the jargon of the day, because this, I'd like to pick it up by the corners and shake it out and throw it in the nearest trash can. This definition is only useful to you if you already have a degree in psychology and if you majored in Skinner, right? Otherwise, if you don't know what a mand is and you look this up, you're not going to know what a mand is, right? Useless. This is why we do the jargon of the day. Okay. Now, eventually, I'm going to scare you here for a moment. Eventually, as you begin to understand what this is, and more of the jargon around it, you'll look at this and you'll go, oh, I get it. Why did they have to make that so hard? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? But let's help ourselves, shall we? Like Ileana Van Zandt says, let's save ourselves and let's look at the working definition, shall we? So manding is, think about it, it's sort of like the word command, right? The end of it. So manding is requesting, demanding, or asking for something. I want you to notice it doesn't say vocally, because you and I mand all the time. And sometimes we do it vocally and sometimes we don't. We're watching, because we are watching different shows that we never watched before. And we're binge watching them. And so we're watching Breaking Bad. I know, judge me. I went how many years with never watching an episode of Breaking Bad, and now I'm in season 5. Good morning to Tijis, am I saying that right? And to Nasser, good morning. But last night in the episode that we were watching of Breaking Bad, a character held out their hand like this. And someone else stood there and said, what? And the guy said, give me your keys. This is the international symbol for give me your keys. He was manding in that moment. Holding your hand out, and stretching it towards someone is a version of a mand. And you don't have to speak to be able to do it. But often we mand vocally. And if we're trying to build language in a child, vocal language, we will encourage vocal manding. But in the beginning, I just want to specify here that the most important thing we do for all individuals on the autism spectrum is to first give them functional communication. And what does that mean? It means that I am able to communicate to you what I want. Now, for some people, and we got to do it the fastest way possible in the beginning. For some folks, that might be vocal speech. If we've got a kiddo or a teen or an adult who is able to say some words, it suggests that, we might be able to get there faster through vocal means, right? But for some folks, if we only have somebody who's making sounds, then a grunt may be enough to mand to say, and a grunt with a point, I want that, right? That is functional communication because it tells you, I want that. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, we don't want to encourage. Yes, we do. We want to encourage functional communication first and foremost, because if you don't have functional communication, you have no rights. And every single human being on this planet has rights. Babies have rights. And how do babies communicate that they need something? They cry and we respond. We don't go, no, sorry, not responding to that. Although I suppose there are some people who teach that. Not here. We want for people to be able to communicate their needs and for us to be able to fulfill them, because that's a basic right of happiness. So we want to start where we are. We want to figure out what is the fastest mode of functional communication that we can do. And then once we've decided on the mode, we start with manding. Why? Because if I want something and if I'm able to convey it to you and I get it, then I will want to request more. And that is the basis upon which we build full communication. But we start with, we all have wants and needs. Even the baby has wants and needs. They get more complex as time goes by, right? That, for a very small child, maybe we want to teach sign when they're hungry. I want to eat, right? Later on, they're going to want to say, not only do I want to eat, but I want a baked potato and I don't want sour cream on it, right? The communication gets more complex. But in the beginning, good morning, Cheryl, and hi, Maggie. In the beginning, we want to start with you request something, you get something. Now, I hate to use the phrase, but in a typical development of an individual, there is this period of time in which everybody's crying and everybody gets their needs met through crying, right? And then later on, it gets a little bit more finessed. Some kiddos will learn, oh, I can cry to get something, but I can also smile at somebody and get what I want, right? And then eventually they hear that other people are making sounds and they begin to put it together and they are like, I want the cookie. I want the cookie, but I don't know how to say cookie. I don't even have the muscular structure to say cookie. So they, right? And they will point or try to grab the thing, right? Typical development. And then they slowly shape the word cookie, but it doesn't sound like cookie in the beginning. When a 1.5-year-old says cookie, they go cookie, you know, and it doesn't come out right. But we recognize, oh, they're looking at the cookie and they want cookie, right? That means they want a cookie, we give them. And gradually they shape that up, shape that up, shape that up, so that eventually they say cookie, we give them the cookie. And there's this phase of time in which it's not quite clear. They'll say something, but we don't understand it. And they fall apart. Tantrum city. We call it the terrible twos because it is the phase in development when even the neurotypical kids can't get what they want the way they want it because they can't communicate it. So they flip out. If we cannot move through that phase, guess what happens? They continue to have tantrums. And you would too. You would too. What do you do when all manner of communication of getting what you want is gone? People tantrum. And police come. Yeah? So what we want to do is give functional communication to all individuals. It's a basic human right. And it isn't necessarily speech, but it starts with Mand. What do you want? And then when you ask for it appropriately, we give it to you. In the beginning, we do. Because what it does is it teaches you that if you ask for it, you're going to get it. So ask for it again. So you ask for it again, you get it. You ask for it, you get it. You ask for it, you get it. And we build off of that. So it might be that for one child, we teach the sign for cookie, that they ask for a cookie. It might be for another child, we allow pointing. It might be for a child who has some words that we teach them, you got to say k, right? And then you get the cookie. But as soon as they communicate it, we give them the cookie. Now, you might break the cookie up into 100 different little morsels, right? To get them to ask 100 times, and they get the cookie. You know what happens? They're happy. They learned. They grew. And we build from there. So if we can go back to the actual definition of Mand for a second, Traven. I know you're ready to move to the question, but I kind of want to go back. So remember that it's requesting, demanding, right? So it's a type of verbal behavior, right? Because verbal doesn't necessarily mean vocal, right? Verbal behavior is all kinds of things that is controlled by a motivating operation. A motivating operation is there's something I want. Or there's something that I need to have less of. So deprivation or aversive, right? It's followed by a specific reinforcement, and the Mand specifies its own reinforcer. So I'm telling you what I want you to reward me with. So say, I'm telling you I want my reward to be the cookie. So what I want and the reward are the same thing. That's all this definition, this useless definition is telling us. Okay, so I ask for something, you give it to me. Please, if you have someone who's building functional communication or language in any way, shape, or form, you want to be working on manding. That for a typical 3-year-old, it's something like 200 times an hour that we want them to be manding. That's a lot of manding. But they will do it if every time they ask for the thing that they want, you give it to them. It's sort of an amazing period of time. And when they get it, whoo, it's really, really powerful. So saying hi to Maggie from Texas. I taught my daughter sign language before she was able to speak. And that's wonderful because then she could request things in sign. And again, there are lots of different forms of functional communication. Don't get hung up on if I teach my child sign language, then they won't speak. If I teach my child a picture exchange communication system, they won't speak. If I teach my child how to push a button on an iPad that talks for them, they won't speak. In fact, the research shows quite the opposite, that more and more individuals on the autism spectrum are getting to vocal speech, but they don't get there for many of them, unless we have given them, if it's really hard for them, we need to give them a functional communication system first. Excuse me. And then when they get that, we can work on the speech, but we got to give them a way to communicate first. And I love this, Melissa. This is exactly right, Melissa. Melissa says, I found sign language as well as saying the word helps sometimes to get the kids speaking. Absolutely. Last week, our jargon terms were expressive and receptive. So when we are teaching manding and functional communication, we want to continue to pair for us, we're going to express it instead of them. Receptively, they get it and they're learning and growing. So if the child goes, we go, cookie, you want a cookie? You can have a cookie, right? And we give them the cookie. If they're signing and they go, oh, you want a cookie? Yes, thank you for asking for the cookie. And we give them the cookie. So absolutely. Why do you do when the item requested is not available, then possible behavior tantrum continues? Okay, so my question for Yolanda is it someone who already has functional communication? Because a lot of times our kiddos, asking for something that isn't there is sometimes a more finessed thing. So I just want to make sure, is the individual you're talking about somebody who is learning language? Because there's only this slice of time that we're going to give them what they want every single time. And that's when we're teaching beginning functional communication. Later on, we're not going to give it to them every time. Later on, we're going to do a lesson called waiting. And the waiting lesson works for all kinds of things. So, but we don't teach those at the same time. First, we teach manding so that we've got manding and they can mand on a regular basis. Once the child can mand like 200, 300 times an hour, we're not going to give them what they want every single time. We're going to give it to them some of the time, but we're going to start to teach waiting. So it's like you asked for the cookie in the beginning. We're going to start with things that are available and they're visual and available. So they ask for the cookie. We're like, you asked for the cookie. Okay, we're going to wait. And we only wait like 1 second. We're like, okay, we're going to wait. Good waiting. Right? And they get the cookie and they go, that wasn't so bad. I don't know what this waiting thing is, but eventually we're going to build that up and we're going to wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to wait 5 seconds. And then we're going to wait 10 seconds. But if they start to tantrum, we're not going to give them the cookie when they tantrum, right? But the next time we do it, we're going to wait just like a second or two less because we're building their tolerance for waiting. And we don't just teach waiting with the thing that they, the cookie that they want, like maybe they want mom's attention, you're on the phone, and we say, okay, we're going to wait. And again, you got to start by waiting a second. And then you gradually just like pulling pizza dough. You're going to gradually pull but don't try to teach manding and waiting at the same time. Your child will be confused and upset. Okay, so Yolanda said they are verbal. So the first thing that I would do right now is start a waiting program. And then we also probably, if the child is verbal, we would want to start a this and then program. There's even an app, I think it's still available online, this and then. So, and we do this visually. We say, first we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. So first we're going to put on our shoes and then we're going to go to the store to get the thing that you want. Or first we're going to do this and then we're going to do that, right? Visual schedules, so important. So if they see another child playing with a toy and they want that toy, so what we would do, not in that moment, in another moment, we would start to teach them how to wait. So you or the therapist would sit there and you would be playing with a toy and they would reach for the toy and we'd say, okay, ask nicely for the toy. And right, so we first teach them to ask for the toy, and at home, they ask for the toy, you give it to them. Okay, we're reinforcing that. Woohoo, I know I've got to ask for the toy. Then once they have that, again, you're not doing this in the moment with the real kiddo, but we're building the skill. So then eventually, when they've got this on a regular basis that they ask for the toy and you give it to them, then we start teaching the wait. So ask for the toy. Okay, we're going to wait 1 second. Wait, good waiting. That was fabulous, right? Then the next time you wait a little bit longer. So and so that it gets longer and longer and that you can teach it with a child. For right now, when they're asking for a toy that the child is asking for, I would use everything in my power to distract, because if you can't obviously beg for the other child to give the toy, right, use distraction, use everything, give them something that's more preferable than the toy until we've taught them the skill. It's a process, right? An absolute process. But I hope you're leaning into your ABA team because this is prime ABA stuff that what they do is they'll work on this at the center or at home and they'll work on it like 100 times over a period of a week and your child gets it. Then they go to the playground and try it out at the playground and teach them coping skills for how to wait, in the real world, because it's going to be slightly different in the real world. Those kids aren't necessarily going to play by the rules. But these things are very addressable. It's just that sometimes as parents, we try to skip over all the boring stuff. It's boring to teach it 100 times. It's absolutely boring. Whereas the therapists know how to make it fun for the kiddo, how to make it fun for themselves, and they literally will do it 100 times. And that's what it takes. And for one kid, maybe it takes 68 times, and for another kid, maybe it takes 400 times, right? But it takes a lot of times. I've used other reinforcements to redirect, kind of hit or miss. Yeah, because here's the thing, is that if it's not, obviously, if somebody says, you see somebody with $1 million and you're like, I want that. And somebody says, well, I'll give you a piece of chocolate cake instead. You're like, no, that's not an equitable trade, right? And we don't know inside your kiddo what the equivalencies are. But if he wants the toy and you're offering him a piece of candy, the piece of candy may not be worth it for him. In fact, nothing might be as equal or better than to what that toy is. And sometimes we just have to teach dealing with emotions. But if the child flips out, we need to be super careful. If there's a tantrum, then we leave and there is no chance to get the toy. And sometimes that is the hardest thing for a parent, because it's like, well, now my day is shot. I wanted to sit at the park. I wanted to talk to my friend. But we must teach that once you tantrum, you're not going to get it. That doesn't work. Otherwise, the child learns, well, all I have to do is tantrum, and then everybody pays attention to me and I get what I want. Super hard stuff. Okay. Now, back to so that's our jargon for today, manding, super duper important. And now you know what it means. Let's move on to our question of the day. What is the one product you can't live without? What's the one thing, they always say, if you were going to get sent to a desert island, like, what is the one thing you got to have? Unfortunately, I'm just going to say my phone. Like, I don't know what I would do without my phone. Even, the power goes out or something, my phone, I still have a charge. I am addicted to my phone. I need to stop it. But that's the one thing that I can't live without. I can make do with almost everything else, but my phone, I'm not able to do without currently. And that's sad. That's sad. And I'd like it to be different, but I'll work on that when we're not in COVID. Okay. Anybody else on that planet too? But I would love to hear from you guys. What's the one product? Like, is there a face cream? Or I also can't live without olive oil. I just can't, olive oil, you cook things with it. You can use it as a moisturizer. I just think it's like one of the most divine substances on the face of the planet. But, there you go. What about you guys? What's the one product you can't live without? We want to know from you what that is. And moving right along to our topic of the day, because we have our guest is going to be here any second, creating a manifesto. I'm so excited that this is our topic today. So do you have already, you may not call it a manifesto, but do you have sort of a drop-down menu for yourself of what's most important? On the hierarchy of things, what's the most important? Somebody taught my husband and I to do this fairly early on into autism. They were like, you just got to get your priorities straight. And I was like, what does that mean? And they said, once you have your priorities straight about what you're doing and why you're doing it, then it becomes easier. You're still struggling because you haven't decided what to do and you don't know what's most important. And I was like, huh, what? But I don't know who gave us the word manifesto, but we sat down and wrote a manifesto. And what it was, there was a one, like, what is most important? What can we not do without right now? What is like the one thing, boom. And we decided, because of a couple of things. One was I only have the one child. In fact, we were attempting to get pregnant when my son was diagnosed with autism, and I was 42 2 at that point. And so we decided maybe we'll adopt later on, and that didn't happen. So I just have the one child. And I just want to say it's easier for me to make this decision, and this will be harder for some of you, but we decided to put our son's therapy as number 1. It was our number 1. Like, therapy has to continue and everything else is less important. But number 2 was that we had to keep a roof over our heads, because which meant that my husband's job was number 2. That if he wasn't working, we weren't going to have enough money coming in so that we would be homeless, which would affect number 1, right? So, and then there were things down the road from that. There was 3 on. I think that my work was number 7 on the first manifesto. And here's the thing about manifestos: they change with time, right? What is most important to you today may not be most important to you down the road. But we made this list. We did not sketch it into concrete, but we took it and we taped it inside one of the kitchen cabinets. And anytime a question came up about, should we do this or should we do that, we checked at the list. At one point, I got offered a teaching job. I used to teach college theater, and loved that. Still, miss it and love having an opportunity to do that. But I could not do that and do number 1. It was not happening, right? And so at one point, somebody offered me a teaching job at a university. And we were like, oh, it's a really good opportunity and it's good money and we'd have to move and there's no ABA therapy where that college is. So I said no to the job. And it hurt, but it didn't hurt anywhere nearly as badly as if I hadn't had that thought process and understood why I was saying no to it, right? There was another time that my husband got a movie. And it meant that he was going to have to go to the desert for like a week and film in the desert. And we looked at the manifesto and we were like, should he do it? Should he not do it? Because he was going to be away and it was going to make things hard. And we were like, well, can therapy still continue? Yes. Are we keeping the roof over our head with my husband working? Yes. And so my husband went to the desert and did the movie. Woohoo. And he kept feeling guilty about it. I was like, why are you feeling guilty about it? We're living our manifesto. Now, when you go to the manifesto and you go, well, here's what we want to do, but that's not what it is on the manifesto, it's time to change the manifesto. But I have to tell you, creating a manifesto for yourself and understanding what is most important to us. And anytime we are up a tree, we stop everything and we write down what's the priority list. Years later, when my son was older and old enough to understand, we made him participate in it as well. And then I used it against him. Because I said to him, what's most important to you? What's most important that we do as a family? And then when he would tell me, I don't want to go, I want to play my video games, I would go, let's look at the list. Where is playing video games on the manifesto? Oh, it's number 42. So I guess, and then he would go, oh, all right, let me put my shoes on. So it was a little more complicated than that, obviously, but it helped him to realize, okay, why am I doing this? What's most important? And it helped him to order his day. All right, that's creating the manifesto, but I see that Bonnie is here and I don't want to make her wait any more than I have already made her wait. So Bonnie Yates is joining us. She is our guest today and most Mondays, whenever we can get her. She is a special education attorney. And we're so thrilled that she's here. I'm on a split screen. I like that. But she is joining us thanks to the Tollner Law Firm. So Bonnie, happy President's Day.
President, heavy wool sweater and wool hat and fur-lined boots. And it's like 25 degrees outside. And, that's life in New York.
You look like you're doing, what was the movie that they played this weekend?
Anna from the North.
Well, but I was going to say, what's the big Omar Sharif movie when they're in Russia?
Dr. Zhivago.
Yes, you look like you're in Dr. Zhivago. That's what it is.
My grandparents were from there, Okay, Shannon, so we have questions from last week that you're going to read. I'm going to answer, but first we're going to tell everybody, thank you, Tollner Law Office, for letting me do this. We are a 7-attorney firm based in San Jose, California, with offices in Los Angeles and Orange counties. We are fiercely committed to your children's educational rights, and the more we can help you understand about them, the more comfortable you will be in an incredibly uncomfortable process that nobody would go through voluntarily and probably would volunteer to have all their teeth pulled without anesthesia instead. You can find us on the web. If you want a free consultation, you can fill out the forms. And if you're in Northern or Southern California or Arizona, we can help you. If you need an attorney and you're not in those states, then look at COPA.net, COPAA.net. They're a great organization. They have an attorney directory. They're having their annual conference in March, all online. So if you want to check that out, check out their annual conference. There's going to be some good stuff they're doing there. We're not giving specific legal advice. We're giving general advice. A lot of you come to us with very specific problems, and we're happy to talk about them on the air, but it's not a substitute for having a conversation with an attorney that can really focus in on your specific district, your specific problem, and so on. So with that, we had a question that we left, question or two from last week that we need to finish, and so on.
And I don't know which question we left off on. So I think we left off on the one about OT, but tell me if I'm wrong.
What was the one before that?
The one I feel like the one before that we answered was about, should we postpone our IEP until we?
No, I said thumbs down on that.
Okay. And then, so the next one, and tell me if it sounds familiar to you. My son has ASD diagnosis. He is 5 and attending kindergarten online this year. We had completed our IEP before COVID, and he had speech and OT services. It has been a nightmare. It took forever for them to figure out how to do speech online, and they never really figured out the OT. Now they are making recommendations for the new IEP, and they are removing OT. Their rationale is that he did okay without it. Please tell me that this is as stupid as I think. Did we answer that one?
No.
Okay.
I mean, in general, it's very dangerous for a district to remove a service without doing an assessment to confirm that there's actually no need. So when they refuse like that to do an assessment, you can ask for an IEE. They may not grant it, but if they should have assessed in an area of suspected disability and they didn't, that's a basis for requesting an IEE. If you file for due process, that will trigger stay put, and they will have to continue all his services. You may not be in a position to file for due process, but sometimes if you just write the district a letter and you tell them, hey, we're invoking stay put, our services should all stay the same, and we're going to go out and get an assessment for occupational therapy, and we're going to seek reimbursement from the district for that assessment, I think you might be able to stop the train before it's out of the station. I guess, it's funny reflecting on the last, 11 months of this, and each like quarter of the year has had themes, right? So the sort of the September to December, or like October to January theme, which popped up, was school districts telling parents they'd withdrawn their kids from the district when in fact they had actually been forced to place them elsewhere because of a dispute about FAPE and the district's failure to provide FAPE during school closure, but districts were trying this withdrawal thing to see if it sticks. Now that we're moving into what hopefully is a phase of where we're slowly coming back into the larger world, and schools are going to reopen, you're going to start hearing that, hey, you did okay without it. Hey, you're fine without it. Apropos COPA and my friend here, Barbara Ebenstein, who's a hearing officer and attorney in New York State, and a wonderful person and attorney. She told me a little story this morning when we were catching up, and it sort of indicates what should be going on. She said there are some good districts in New York. In one district, a man that I know, who's the special education director, asked the board for extra money. He said, I'm going to have to assess every one of these kids when they come back into the district after a year. And I don't want to use teachers or school psychologists to do the testing because I want them to be able to be there 100% for the students. So I need money to get outside assessments by private professionals so I can figure out where the kids are at so I can serve them. Okay? That's what your team should have said.
Yes, but what was the response when this professional asked for more money? Did they give it to him?
I don't know. I think he got it.
Okay, well, that's the kind of school we want to be at, where professionals like that are working.
Well, guys, without like deep, wandering too deep into the pool of politics, New York State spends a lot more money on education than California does, and guess what? They have better programs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just sort of follows, doesn't it?
Yep.
Well, okay, so for this parent, they can't just say you're not getting as you said, OT. So they got to ask for them to be evaluated.
Correct.
Is that the takeaway? Okay.
Yeah, and so I would be really aggressive. I'd say not only do we not agree with you, we think you owe us 11 months of compensatory education.
Well, we have
one session a week for every week that school is in session.
Talk about, phases of where we're at. A lot of our questions that are where we're at right now are people in one way or another, whether they know the word or not, are asking, how do I get compensatory education? So hold that thought. We're going to get there. In fact, the next question. We are starting the process of asking for comp ed this summer. Can you outline the steps of how we pursue this? My hope is to get them to pay for a one-to-one tutor for the summer. My fear is that they will offer a summer school in person with masks. My son is in 4th grade. He has missed so much academically this year, and I'm concerned that a summer of masks will not come close to getting him caught up.
Well, here's another hard truth on Monday. There are certain things in this life, there are many things in this life that are unfair. One thing that's unfair is that in order to win some of these cases or to be successful in some of these situations, you may have to give up your idea that the school district is going to provide it because you ask for it. You may instead need to create a record by having an IEP and showing why the district offering won't work. And you may need to pay for the tutor yourself and sue the district for reimbursement. They're not going to look. They're most of them are running at a budget deficit of at least 10%, and they are going to say no to everything right now because of that. So you're going to have to double down if you think something is necessary. Well, that's a little bit like princessy of me to say that, because it's not always within somebody's capability to pay for something and then show that it worked and worked better than what the district, thought, and then, bring them to heel. But in a lot of these situations, that's the only way you're going to get it. I had this come up recently with a mom who is a wonderful mom and a former teacher, and she's been fighting, really hard to get her school district to give her son a research-based reading program. He has autism and he's got a reading comprehension problem. He's very bright. And she said to me, look, I can't afford to take him out of public school. I can't afford to pay $150 an hour 3 times a week for ed therapy. What am I going to do? And I said, go meet with this educational therapist, see if she'll train you on the programs, you buy the books and you start doing them with your son. Because that's the only thing I can think of that'll work. What you really should do is take him out of public school and put him in a private school for SLD. But if you're telling me that's not going to happen, we're just banging our head against the wall with the district. The district's, yeah, this is helpful. We're doing it. It's working well. And, all the research that we've read says it doesn't. And even if it were, it's supposed to be 5 times a week and he's getting it 2 times a week. Tough choices, guys.
Yeah, it is tough to, but I appreciate you saying that, Bonnie, because I think a lot of times people think, well, if I go to a lawyer, they're going to tell me that the only answer is this litigious route. And that sometimes it's about, just looking at it. We were talking earlier about creating a manifesto. And if what's most important is that your child learn what they're going to learn, you got to make the decision. Am I going to fight the district for it and spend all my time doing that? Or am I going to learn how to teach it? So I appreciate you saying that. Okay, what are Bonnie's thoughts on having our kids repeat a year due to COVID? I feel like this year is a waste and wonder if a do-over isn't the best choice.
It might be a good choice. It would depend on a lot of different things that you haven't included in your email. If it's a great teacher, if the peer group is good. I mean, retention has been disfavored for a long time in special ed circles. And I think that's because the notion was if you conceded that a child needed to be retained, you were pretty much acknowledging that you hadn't offered FAPE and he hadn't made progress. For the first time during COVID, I've actually seen some schools agree to retention. I don't know enough facts about your case to know whether retention would be the best option, and what class he or she would be returning to. Is it general ed? Is it special ed? But retention is a possibility, and if you assess the situation and you don't think there's a better alternative, then I would certainly consider it seriously. It's an IEP team decision, by the way.
Okay. Last week you talked about prior written notice. If we get prior written notice and disagree with the decision, what are our options?
Well, I guess that would depend on what the prior written notice said. But like I was thinking about my cases this morning, and it's funny, I have one case where I know they said the family withdrew their student, and I can't remember whether, it was in a letter or a prior written notice. I have to go find it. But if it is in a prior written notice, you can either respond to the prior written notice the way you'd respond to an IEP in writing, tell them why you disagree, or you can request another IEP meeting to, discuss whatever the issue is that you need to discuss. The purpose of prior written notice, in my mind, is sort of fairness and clarity. And prior written notice is supposed to be given every time the district agrees to or fails to do something with respect to the issues of eligibility, goals, services, and placement. Okay, so that pretty much, and assessment. So that pretty much covers it as far as when districts should be doing these PWNs. They don't do them nearly as often as they should. The districts that have their legal act more together do them more often in cases because they realize legally it protects them. So when you get a prior written notice from the district, you got to read it very carefully, and you got to look at what it is that they're saying, and you got to consider, like, why is it that they feel it's important to tell you this now? Districts were supposed to send out a PWN when school closed, right, in March. Many of them never did it. Many of them did it months late. But that would be one example, right? They're changing the delivery of services to the student from face-to-face learning to a distance learning mode. That's considered to be a change, I guess, in placement or services, triggering the need for either an IEP or a prior written notice. But I get PWNs on all sorts of things, and I encourage parents to use them because parents frequently leave IEP meetings and they're understandably frustrated because they kind of got the runaround. They've asked an intelligent and fair question and they're just told no. And when somebody does that to you and they patronize you like that, it makes me feel like I'm about 4 years old and you're talking down to me. And I don't allow myself to lose my cool anymore. I still find it internally irritating. But I think the way to handle it is to push back and say, you're not just allowed to say no to me. This is a process. You have to give me notice. I'm entitled to know what you believe the issue was, what your decision is, and what resources you relied on in making your decision. So if you think about it from a school district perspective, let's say you ask for an IE is a bad example. What would be a good example? Let's say you ask for a tutor at the IEP and the district says, no, I don't think it's necessary. And you say, well, I'd like to discuss that. And they say, well, our answer is no. The response to that is, please give me prior written notice. Then if they give you the prior written notice and you don't think it's complete enough, you can write them back and say, your prior written notice is incomplete for X, Y, or Z reason. Ultimately, a prior written notice becomes a piece of evidence in a due process, and you could have an allegation that says the district's February 15th prior written notice denied student a FAPE because, and then you talk about why it denied him a FAPE, just the way you would with an IEP.
So I'm going to ask a really beginner question. I'm not going to use.
Qualify your questions. Your questions are so not beginner.
Well, this one might be.
Even if they were a beginner, beginners' questions are great questions.
So we get a lot of like communication from the school. Like you get an email this, you get an email that. Sometimes you get a letter that comes in the mail. When we get these prior written notice, does it look just like any other communication, or does it say this is prior written notice that we are changing?
It should say it headline at the top.
Really?
Prior written notice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because
it should use the words prior written notice as well.
Okay. So for the first, now this was a relatively new concept to me, like a year and a half ago when we started talking about prior written notice. And I got used to thinking, okay, we have the IEP, it's a legal document. But all the time schools act like it's not, like it's this fluid thing and they change things. And my new understanding as of a year and a half ago is that if they're not going to do what's in the document, they have to give you prior written notice for the fact that they're changing it. Correct. But I feel like this person is saying, okay, they sent me. So the example that I can
give prior written notice verbally at an IEP. That's possible, but it has to conform to what I said. You have to give the reasons and what information you relied on.
But so then I think the question that this viewer is asking that I now have too is that if they give you prior written notice, and like, so I can think of for my son that we had written into the IEP that he had placement, and they agreed that it would be with a certain teacher. They almost never do that, but in this instance they did, that it would be with a certain teacher because he was going into a class that was a split. It was a 5-6 split. And they agreed that he was going to have placement in that class with a specific teacher. Then the school started and they decided that they were going to disband the 5-6 and there wasn't going to be a 5-6 split. And they moved him. And, and they told me that they were
general ed?
Yes. And they told me that they were going to move him. And so I would imagine that's prior written notice. But what happens when you don't agree? What's the recourse when even though they've given you prior written notice and
you can file for mediation. You can request a mediation only, or you can file for due process.
Okay. So we do have recourse. They can't just, because otherwise it feels like, well, they can do the IEP meeting and then they can send the prior written notice and then we didn't get what we wanted anyway. So our recourse is mediation or due process. Okay, great.
Right. I mean, mediation only is something that doesn't involve going to due process. You have a settlement conference with the district. You're not, apparently represented by an attorney, which doesn't mean you can't consult with an attorney behind the scenes, but it'll be the district and you, and, usually like a facilitator that they hire. So unfortunately, those people tend to claim to be neutral, but their paycheck is signed by the district. But that gives you an opportunity to sit down with them outside of an IEP meeting where they're more conscious about following procedure and, that it's being recorded and at least see where they're coming from. Okay. But, there's nothing I'd like to see better than all of you filing for due process this year without attorneys and just jam up the system. And believe me, the deals will get better.
Well, that's a very interesting take on things.
Yeah.
I think we need to do a class at some point, Bonnie, because the idea of filing due process, as I know you say it's
next week, next Monday.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it, because I know you say it's easy peasy, but the idea of it makes me shake, and I'm sure it makes other people shake too. Like I would need to know exactly how to do it before I threaten.
You know what? I mean, if I said it's easy, shame on me. Shame on me. I should do a whole other show on the emotional experience of being a lawyer in these disputes. Maybe some people think they're fun. I think they're stressful. They cause a lot of anxiety from me. I've learned how to deal with it, kind of, sort of, but I don't want you to think anybody loves this.
Okay.
Maybe I'm being too transparent, but like, if you like getting hit in the face with a crowbar, bring it on. I mean,
Okay. Well, I think that well, you seem so confident.
Why would anybody who's a human being ever like watching their clients be screwed over by a school district that you know is lying to them?
But I see you must have a higher tolerance for pain then, because you decided to do this for a living, and to give back. I couldn't do it, Bonnie.
Come on, look what you're doing instead.
This is different. This is
look. When the bars reopen, we can have this discussion between the two of us. But let's do it next Monday. Let's talk about due process.
All right, next Monday, due process workshop. I'm going to let everybody know that we're doing that. Okay, we had one last question, and I really want to get to it because then we'll be clean docket, right?
Yeah, I've got something at the hour, so.
Okay. All right. So we got like 2 minutes here. How can I get the school to pay for speech therapists outside of school? We've been getting our speech this year online and it's not getting it done. She needs in person and the school won't allow that.
Insurance or pay for it yourself, give 10 business days notice and file for due process. If you can get the district to agree to do it with an outside provider, more power to you. You should ask, they'll say no, and then you should move on to the next level.
Okay. Fabulous. Perfect timing. Bonnie, tell us again about Tollner Law Offices before you have to buzz off.
Tollner Law Offices is on the web. Shannon's nice enough to put it up every week. We'd love to hear from you. If you want a consultation and you're in the state of California or Arizona, go ahead and fill it out. And, please keep asking these questions. They're really grounding and important for me to see like where people are getting tripped up. It's helpful. So it's not, just a question of you give me the information and it helps you. It's you give me the information and it helps me. So I really appreciated the questions from the last two get-togethers because I think they're very telling. I think they tell us a lot.
Well, Bonnie, we appreciate you. We appreciate Tollner Law Offices. Thank you so much. And I know you got things to go to. Stay warm.
And that's not a problem. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Just reminding you guys, as we finish the show out here, I never did get my makeup on, but life goes on. But tomorrow we're back with the best of Temple Grandin. It is a pre-recorded show, but it's still really good. And then on Wednesday, we are back live with Dr. Doreen Grampiche. You're not going to want to miss that. And then we've got live shows the rest of the week. So please make sure that you participate in that. I also want to remind you that we now have a video that plays at the end of the show that tells you all the ways that you can participate with us here and that we appreciate more than you can know when you give us likes and shares and the whatnot, because that's what keeps Autism Live on the air. So if you like what you saw here, make sure that you watch this video. But I will be back live with you on Wednesday, but we'll be back tomorrow with Temple Grandin. So until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.